Hey there everyone, how's it going? Hope you're all doing well. Today I'm talking about reverb. I think reverb is a really critical part of kind of the mixing process and getting the sound of your piece right. So I'm going to give you a little insight into what reverbs I use, how I use them, and basically just a geeky kind of chat about reverb. Also, hopefully this might give you an insight into how you can use reverbs to really kind of sculpt your sound and how you can use it quite creatively. So I'm going to run through this this list of reverbs, and I'm going to do it in alphabetical order. So first up is potentially the GOAT, and it is Altiverb, which is the most expensive reverb that I own, but it's the one that I use the most. Particularly for my kind of orchestral sort of writing, this is the reverb which I use on almost every track because it has the most stunning captures of the best concert halls in the world. It's sumptuous and warm, the concert house. Just a really, really great space to have. So what is also really useful with Altiverb is that they have these studios and scoring stages, which I've used quite a bit in the past, and particularly if it's more of a chamber music kind of piece. Here's the piano track room. This is a really short reverb. And without. You can hear that it just puts it in a slightly different space, which could be really useful. If we go to scoring stage, this is where I use quite often the 20th Century Fox scoring stage and the Todd AO. This is the Todd AO, so this is the piano with the Todd AO now. And the Abbey Orchestra with Todd AO as well. And then 20th Century Fox scoring stage. Let's move on to the next one in the list. I'll leave these instruments up and let's try the next one. So ChromaVerb is an inbuilt one from Apple, and I actually use ChromaVerb quite a lot on percussion. Okay, so what I'd often use Chroma for is just adding a tiny bit of space to something. So we want it to be 100% wet, 0% dry, tiny bit of pre-delay, that's probably do. And then I'm going to use this EQ to kind of mold the sound a little bit. So let's get it in. And without. So you can hear how this would be actually really useful for putting lots of different percussion libraries in the same space. And then obviously you get a lot of control over the sound of this. This is a really amazing reverb plugin to have. Let's just put it up to a wacky decay time. So you can really hear how the EQ particularly affects it, and now we can do kind of the opposite. We can put on a massive low pass. And you can be super creative. Okay, let's put it up to 46 seconds. Extremely useful for sound design. Normally, I do use this on a very short decay time because it's got an easy EQ there, really simple controls and really pleasing. Obviously, you can change the different types as well. Normally, I just use this as a room to kind of bring percussion instruments together. So that's normally what I use ChromaVerb for. Okay, next up, Cinematic Rooms Professional. This is one of my workhorse reverb plugins. Let's just listen to Abbey Road orchestra strings. Really beautiful sound just out the box. And the amazing thing is that we have incredible presets, which are extremely, extremely useful. The halls are amazing. One that I use all the time is dark hall or deep hall. Deep hall is really, really great. Just out the box, these presets are fantastic. Great, great starting points. But what I do use very, very regularly are the stages. And this Orchestration Studio I use for the early reflections. And then I'll have another bus with an Altiverb open and it'll only have the late reflections. So we're kind of dealing with the stage, like the early reflections here with Cinematic Rooms Pro, and then the kind of the room, the tail with Altiverb. Okay, so this is just the Orchestration Studio. It's like 1.9 seconds. And that was just the early reflections on its own. You can hear it's a really very short decay time. But it does definitely add something. And then if I add in the tail. Okay, that's Cinematic Rooms Pro. East-West Spaces Mark II. This is the first reverb that I ever purchased, because I think the first library that I bought was a Composer Cloud from East West, and this came with it. So here is just out the box solo cello. Really great preset, 3.8 seconds there. What I use this for mostly, in most cases, is the digital Hollywood Hall to glue an orchestra together. Normally this 3.8 seconds one. So it sounds like this. Again, it just gives that kind of that gloss over everything. This is what I normally use East-West Spaces 2 for. In the past, I used it all the time, but this is how I use it now, is just normally for this emulation. And of course, there's all the kind of presets that you would expect. It's a really, really useful reverb to use. But yeah, this is what I use this really brilliant plugin for now. Okay, I'm going to skip Little Plate because we've got a SuperPlate to look at. So I'm going to now skip to Oxford Reverb. This is the reverb that I use the least of all the reverbs. And I just think that perhaps it's something to do with the design or just the sound, or I'm not totally sure that I would always just reach for Cinematic Rooms or Altiverb first. However, I do think that this is a really useful, brilliant reverb. You know, products by Sonnox are generally tremendous. Okay, this is just the default with the strings again. Okay, what's great is we can bump up the reverb time. You can kind of see exactly how the audio is going to be affected. And if I was to make this into a wider early reflections, well, you can see it changes here. If I was to make it a bit bigger as well, so we're now into like a 15-meter stage. you can hear that this is actually, just by changing 2 parameters, we've changed the complete feel, sorry, 3 parameters, the complete feel of this reverb. Let's just look at some presets because they're always good starting places. Let's start with a hall, big wet hall. Does what it says on the tin, sounds great. Really nice decay time, really nice decay time. Let's just try another one. Again, it's got tons of rooms, which I don't think I would ever really need to use. Post, again, very useful. Emulations, let's look at, let's put some percussion into a, this is a lexicon, I assume. Really great, and let's just try some solo cello. Yeah, really, really useful, really great. Fantastic presets, as you'd expect. And I'm pretty sure, don't quote me on this, that Sonnox have a Black Friday, like 91% off deal just now. Who knows? I'm not totally sure. While I'm kind of taking a break, now would be the perfect time for you to like and subscribe this video if you're enjoying this kind of look through all my reverbs. And if you have any questions so far, put them down below. Okay, so this is the reverb, which I probably should use a lot more of because it gets tons of control. And I do like the kind of the visual thing of even if I just change the tail and the early reflections mix, you know, I quite like that visual. I think I'm actually just not smart enough to understand what everything means. You know, I'm a composer, not a mix engineer, and I just perhaps find it easier to kind of recognize what things are going to do in something like cinematic rooms, probably because I'm just a simple creature. But anyway, let's just check out Silky Hall with a piano. Yeah, 3.61 second decay time is really gorgeous. Okay, that's Oxford Reverb by Sonnox, the one which I should use more of, but don't because I generally do just default to Cinematic Rooms Pro. Okay, now we come to FabFilter Pro-R. This is one of my, again, go-to reverbs. I'm going to make this a bit bigger again for you. This is what I use if I'm creatively kind of molding my sound. I'm going to open up actually an instance of Omnisphere here. Yeah, that's the one. What I love about Pro-R is just actually the simplicity, the clarity, and the control, which is why this is like one of my absolute top reverbs to use for actually just sculpting sound. So to give you an example of the sort of thing that I would perhaps do, I'm going to bust this to the verb. And let's just put it on a little bit. Okay, I might really want this this sound to go on for kind of longer, but for it to just hang around in kind of the darkness. So what I do is I use the EQ to do something like this. Let me turn off the echo. Now I can turn it up very, very easily to a super long, stupid reverb. I can change the distance, thickness, character, width. So now it's very, very, very wide. I can obviously turn the mix up again. So just all those changes that I made there, I automate when I'm writing a track and I'm doing sound design. Pro-R is what I use for sound design. So in this ballet that I'm writing, it's completely digital, completely in the box, and using a lot of synths, Omnisphere, Trillion, a couple of live things, but mostly kind of all these synths. And I'm using Pro-R to automate the sound. So again, just having really simple controls and an extremely good graphic EQ makes this one of the most useful plugins for me. This is not to say that I only use it for creative sound design, but that's just how I've used it mostly over the last little while. Also, what's great is you can automate all these EQ nodes. So as a sound is developing, it can become darker, it can become brighter. And I just love the simplicity that we have. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 controls plus some EQ. You don't need any more to be kind of creative with your EQ. So that's why FabFilter Pro-R2 is one of my absolute go-to reverbs. Similarly, we can do something kind of more interesting with percussion as well. So we can make it have a huge, huge decay. Okay, and what we can do also, because I have these set as pre-faders, is I can turn down the dry signal. And you only get a lot more reverb. In fact, I can turn the dry signal off completely. Then you only get that reverb. Which is super useful for sound design. So yeah, when you set up your buses, make sure they're all pre-fader, and you can have really good control over how much of the dry signal and wet signal is there. So that was purely just a reverb only signal. And that's what I use Pro-R2 from FabFilter for. Okay, Seventh Heaven. This is one which I use only in certain occasions, not all the time, but it is a really useful, beautiful version. Now you'll notice that I've just got the basic one. I don't have the Pro. If I do want to do things with pre-delay, there's a trick. I use this plugin called Sound Delay, which I think is free by Voxengo, or however you say it. So if I want to add on some pre-delay, which you normally do if you're dealing with reverb, let's say I want to add like 60 milliseconds of pre-delay. Well, I just click 60, and now this sound delay, which is before the reverb, is adding a pre-delay to this. So, and let's say I really crank it up. So you can hear the pre-delay that is adding. Huge pre-delay, which is obviously massive. But Voxengo or sound delay, whatever you want to call it, is a really useful plugin. And it saved me from having to really buy the Pro version. I just can't justify it. I don't use this one often enough. Particularly when I can, and always do, put an EQ before and after my reverbs and the sound delay as well. So I can really sculpt the sound of my reverbs quite dramatically. So let's just hear this, the strings. Again, a really pleasing sound. Let's put on a slightly less of a pre-delay. And then a bit of piano. Again, really useful sound. I don't use it that much, hence why I don't actually have the Pro. But I can control it just as much as my other reverbs when I use an EQ and this Voxengo sound delay before it. So Liquid Sonnox won't quite be getting my money for the Pro version. But it's a really useful, really colourful reverb as well. Again, I normally just default to Cinematic Rooms, Altiverb, and Pro-R before moving to Seventh Heaven. Okay, SilverVerb. This is a really useful one from Apple. So again, a lot of control, really control the size of it. Good to have pre-delay in it as well. It's a bit of modulation. So you can really control the sound of your reverb. So that kind of takes on a totally different sound. Again, this is one of the inbuilt ones. I can't say that I go to it immediately, but again, it's really useful. If you get to know the controls and the sounds, then you know it's going to be useful. You don't have to fork out the thousands of pounds that I have done on these plugins. Okay. Next up, another one from Apple, Space Designer. And what's great is Apple have given us loads and loads of presets that we can use. Okay, let's just try Grand Hall 3. It's 3.5 seconds. And let's do it with the Vista solo cello. Really great sound. Again, you get a little bit of EQ controls as well, so I'd probably roll off with the cello out, not that. I would roll off a bit of kind of about there. Maybe not as much as that, but you get the idea. You get a lot of control over exactly where you want the reverb to actually sound and be heard, and it means that you get a much less muddy mix as well. I just got rid of here because it can be a bit harsh sometimes. And let's just try some percussion with it as well. Concrete Room. No, Evolving Room. Let's see what this one does. And let's just try it with some concussion. Okay, SuperPlate. This is from Soundtoys, and I use this one a lot with strings. I normally just use the classic 140. I normally have it about 1 and a bit. If you saw the most recent video I put out, you'll see I use this plugin. Quite a big pre-delay, bit of modulation, and I always kind of tweak out the highs and the lows. So again, this is another plugin where I get a lot of control over the sound. And this is what the cello sounds like with it. Again, it just gives that little kind of bloom after a note, which can be really, really useful. It just kind of glues things together in a very pleasing way. And you might have noticed in the last video that I did with the strings, I had all the solo strings going into this really sharp plate, and it just kind of acted to kind of bind their sounds together. Again, I'm using this to really kind of mold the color of my sound. It's quite a colorful reverb to use. And again, I'm just using it to kind of make everything sort of sound like it's in sort of the same space, to add a little bit of color to it, a bit of kind of sheen, kind of make them all sound like they're sort of telling the same story from the same space if you're kind of blending libraries together. Okay, so that is Soundtoy's SuperPlate, which is a supremely useful one to use. Okay, and now we come to two very, very fun ones from Valhalla. Supermassive. Gotta love it. Absolutely fantastic. Let's try with this Omni. Okay, so we can warp it. See what warp does. Okay, we can change the rate, change the depth. Great, we can EQ it a little bit as well. Let's do maximum, bit more width and a lot of warp and a longer delay. Let's turn the modulation up quite significantly. Okay, and then got some great presets as well. Again, this is one of these reverbs that I use for kind of sound design. Really useful. Again, very simple controls, don't need any more than this. Very, very useful reverb. And then finally, the reverb that we all know and love, Valhalla VintageVerb. One of the greatest reverbs out there, I think, just for its sheer usability. Tons of control over everything. You really don't need any more than these controls for reverb. And there with a 26-second reverb on it, you suddenly got the start of a piece. You've got something special coming. So again, a super, super useful reverb to use. If I was only going to have one reverb, this would be it, I think. I know I've probably said that about Altiverb before. But if I was going to buy one reverb to use for the rest of time, I think it would be Valhalla VintageVerb because it is the most useful one. To finish off, I'm going to show you how I use these reverbs in combination. So I'm going to stick with Abbey Road Orchestra. And just to reiterate, we're only using the close signal here. So it's a very, very dry signal. So we're going to call this one Early Reflections. And we're going to create another new bus called Late Reflections. I'm going to show you what I normally do when I'm kind of blending sounds together. So you can call this a little bonus tip. So normally what I do is I bring everything back down to 0. And I'm going to load in Cinematic Rooms Professional. And I'm going to go to Spaces, or Studio, sorry, Stage. Orchestration Studio. I'm going to bring that all the way down to 0.2. I'm going to put on just the early reflections. So we're just putting in a little bit of a space. Now this is where pre-delay becomes really important. For strings, you want a fairly long pre-delay. So it takes a few seconds before the reverb actually starts to operate. So this is normally how I kind of set up my early reflections. I'll just have a quick look at some of these settings. Uniform is always good. Width, full, if it's at the front, is always good. If we're going further back, I normally turn it down a little bit, which can be quite useful sometimes, but let's just leave it at not 150. Let's leave it at full, 7.5. A lot of these things I'll kind of change as I listen to it and as I mix it. Normally, if I'm dealing with the strings, I leave this pretty much as is in the EQ. If I'm dealing with a sound that's further away, so percussion, I'll begin to roll off some highs and really kind of reduce the width. But what I do here is I leave the width at kind of 100%, just for this one, simply because it is the front of the stage and you get the widest sound. I'll roll off a little bit of bass, but this would kind of be how I would sort of set up my strings early reflections. And then I'll load in another bus, an Altiverb. And let's just do Mechanics Hall because it's gorgeous. Okay, so Concert Hall, Mechanics Hall. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put on a pre-delay again of about 60 seconds. Slightly slower attack. And what I'm going to do is turn off the early gain. So now I've got Altiverb, which is only the tail, and I've got Cinematic Rooms Pro, which is only the early reflection. So I now have a lot of control over the actual sound. So let's just bring these all in a little bit. mixing my modes quite horribly there. So I'm going to turn up the late reflection and turn down the early reflection. And that is the great thing about having this setup, is that you just get loads of easy control. Don't have to go into the plugins at all. I can just use the sends here to actually just decide on how much is going to early and how much is going to late. So for strings, you generally want less early and more late reflections. And I think that gives quite a pleasing sound. I think I would actually even turn up the tail and turn down the earlies a little bit. So I hope you found that interesting, taking a wee look at the reverbs that I use. It was actually really useful for me to be able to see that there's some reverbs there that I should use a lot more regularly than I do just now. Things like some of the Apple inbuilt ones are really brilliant, and actually I've neglected them over the last wee while. And also I'm in the habit of just going to cinematic rooms, Altiverb and Pro-R, and actually I'm probably missing out on a lot of colour by not kind of expanding the other reverbs that I use. If you have any questions or comments, do put them down below. Be happy to get back to you. Let me know what your favourite reverb is, and if any of these are on your shopping list for Black Friday as well. Do give us a wee sub if you fancy it as well. Give us a wee like. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next one. I've got some really exciting videos coming up, which I can't really talk about. That's all I'm going to say. But there's good videos coming up. Subscribe to be in on the secret when they come out. Otherwise, have a good day. See you next time. Cheers.